And one thing that stuck out to me as I, was reading through your book is his resolve and his commitment to fight for what he believed was true and what I believe is true as well. Yet at the same time, that a fight that was fought in the midst of a lot of loneliness and isolation. And Gerstner had allies, in other places. He wasn't entirely alone. And of course, in the body of Christ, we have a great cloud of witnesses as well. But a lot of his fights, it's not as if he was coming from a united faculty fighting against a Bart who, is overseas, somebody out there who's largely influential. So in that regard, the Van Til is coming from a position where he's writing against Bart, but, in the midst of an entire faculty who would, in large measure is going to agree with his critiques. But Gerstner, in many ways is kind of doing his own thing from within his own faculty. You even had a story there where he was surprised. I mean, he had another person, perhaps a little bit more sympathetic on faculty, but when Gerstner was traveling, I think overseas, he read in the paper, or news in the paper came out in the Pittsburgh Gazette, that the man resigned at a private meeting, and he didn't have many people around him, did he? I mean, immediately around him, helping him out and really carrying on the fight with him.
Yeah, those are all good points. I think the loss of Addison Leach,
that's right. Yeah.
1961, was a tremendous blow, because Leach was, an evangelical theologian, and he had previously been the main theology professor and then also president of Pittsburgh Xenia Seminary, which was the only seminary of the UPCNA. One thing that your OPC listeners might be interested in is, Gerstner and other UPCNA people, the UPCNA was not the mainline church. There was no need for them to leave the mainline church, because they simply weren't.
And they were called, we should say, it's probably worthwhile to mention to people that part of the Presbyterian family tree, they were called the United Reformed Presbyterian Church. I'm getting that messed up, but they were called United because they were a previous merger of Associate Reformed, correct?
Yeah, back in 1858. Right. And so then, when Gerstner joined the faculty of Pitt Xenia, Addison Leach was the leading theologian, and a few years after that, he became president. But they were trying to make, Pitt Xenia more conservative, more evangelical, and they were having some success in that. They were aligning themselves with, Christianity Today magazine, and that was, just, setting off alarm bells amongst the PCUSA leadership, because they did not want to have another Fuller seminary, on the East Coast, of the United States. And so Gerstner believes that's what led the PCUSA officials to swiftly move for, merger of the denominations, because then if those two denominations merged, then they could consolidate Pitt Xenia Seminary with Western in Pittsburgh, and that's ultimately what did happen. And then the evangelical Pitt Xenia faculty, they were taken over basically by a more liberal seminary, and that's what Addison Leach was.
So 2 or 3 years after that is when he resigned.
Well, he resigned twice. He resigned from the presidency of Pitt Xenia right as they were consolidating, and then he took a 1-year sabbatical. They gave him a 1-year sabbatical. Then he came back and taught at the new consolidated Pittsburgh Seminary, and the liberalism was just too much for him. And so he resigned in protest, and that was a front page story in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and Addison Leach was really revered in the UPCNA. So this was a big deal. Now this story, however, it's not in any of the Pittsburgh Seminary history books, and it really should be. And I discuss it and analyze it in my book, and there's a historian at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania who's pointed this out as well in a review of the Walther volume on Pittsburgh Seminary. He complained that this situation with Addison Leach isn't even mentioned, and in terms of the reasons why he resigned. So this is a what we have going on here is we have an extension of the Machen controversy.
Certainly.
And even Leach's father-in-law, from what I remember in my research, had some association with Machen. So Machen's influence in the UPCNA is kind of manifest here in some of these battles that happen with the merger and then the consolidation of the seminaries. And the reason Gerstner didn't resign was because he felt that if he resigned, there weren't going to be any conservative voices, and it would just be a total, onslaught of liberalism.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to stay there and try to be a positive, reformed evangelical witness, and he did that to the best of his ability. And there were some other evangelical faculty there. Bob Kelly, who was a New Testament professor, was sympathetic to Gerstner, not as militant, but sympathetic evangelical. And then also there was a biblical archaeologist that ended his career in kind of the mid 60s who was more evangelical too, and his name was James Kelso, and he retired in about 64. So there just were some retirements and obviously Addison Leach departing, and so the evangelical minority faculty members, that number depleted pretty swiftly after the consolidation. But Gerstner wanted to stay and be an evangelical witness.